And the international papers, they're largely focusing on the US today and its allies gearing up for a military intervention in Syria, aren't
That's
they?
right. It's all over the press today. It's on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. The U.S. paves the way for a Syria response. The Guardian, meanwhile, has a more cynical view. If we take a look at this cartoon where you see Obama weighing up military action, intervention versus non-intervention. And if we take a look at that cartoon, you'll see that, well, basically on the scales is a bunch of, bodies of dead civilians there. So a much more cynical view. And now, The Independent, meanwhile, takes a closer look at just what kind of form this military intervention would take. The key word, of course, is surgical strikes, but what does that really mean? Well, you can see a map there that shows the key sites that could be potential targets, mainly military installations, known chemical sites, government buildings, etc. And then there's a little map down there as well, which shows how various British, American forces, etc., would be deployed in the region.
And a lot of newspapers inevitably asking the question as well, is this actually going to work if it does happen?
That's right. Well, according to Foreign Policy, probably not. Now, they say that one of the key architects of this Syria war plan actually doubts that these surgical strikes will work. And he's been actually questioning this policy publicly. His name is Chris Harmer. He's a former U.S. Navy planner that's been responsible for outlining this influential proposal for these strikes. And he says actually too much faith is being put on their effectiveness. And he says that little discussion is being made about what wider goals of such attacks should be. He says this is the low-cost option that's likely to be pointless and worse, counterproductive.
And other papers also doubtful that these surgical strikes are really going to solve the problem.
That's right. The Wall Street, the Washington Post rather says that Obama has really been dragging his feet for 2 years about whether or not to intervene. And in fact, the dangerous outcomes that he's been worried might actually be precipitated by any U.S. Intervention will have actually come out of the absence of any intervention. For instance, in Syria, we see all sorts of groups affiliated to Al-Qaeda. Also, violence has spread to neighboring Jordan and Iraq. Now, the Washington Post says that some response is indeed needed to this, allegations of chemical attacks, but it needs to be part of a larger strategy that doesn't rely solely on military might. Now, The Independent, meanwhile, an article by Kim Sen-Gupta, he says that we really have to learn our mistakes from Iraq and let the inspectors do their job. He says it's important to let this UN team really gather evidence to see who was behind this chemical attack and then act according to the protocol. And if not, well, any intervention now runs the risk of being associated with, the U.S. intervention in Iraq in 2003. Now, the International Herald Tribune is a little bit more cynical about just what a good job the UN inspectors are doing. If we take a look at this cartoon, it says, well, you see 2 UN inspectors there looking at 2 bodies, and they say, if they really were killed by chemical weapons, we'll have to stop Assad. But you can see there behind them piles and piles and piles of bodies, with these labels saying killed by Assad snipers, tanks, artillery, machine guns. So basically, why would there be any intervention now?
Flo, thanks very much. Flo Vilmanel with the international papers, obviously largely talking about Syria today. Thanks very much. That's the papers then. Now it's time for the latest news. We'll be with you right after the break here on France 24. Do stay with us if you can.